Today. My name is Margaret McLeod. I work for the U.S. Embassy in New Delhi. It's such a pleasure to see the good work that you are doing, teaching, and learning about how each of us can make a difference in protecting the Earth. Government leaders believe, like you, that it's very important that all of us around the world work as hard as we can to slow climate change and do our best to reverse it. From the seaside to the mountains, from villages to the big city, climate change is a very serious risk to our environment, our health, our communities, our economic well-being, even to our national security. Since the first month of his presidency, President Biden announced that responding to climate change was an important part of U.S. foreign policy and national security. In April 2021, the United States and India together launched the U.S.-India Climate and Clean Energy Agenda 2030 partnership because we want to work together to achieve ambitious climate and clean energy targets. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to have a big effect on societies, economies, institutions, and governments around the world. It's affected hundreds of thousands of people. Over 3 billion people were locked in at home, hoping to keep one another safe. Faced with this public health emergency, Swechha, with support from the U.S. State Department, facilitated this fantastic series of online workshops to engage experts from around the country to equip citizens with the skills to live in a more environmentally friendly manner. By anticipating and addressing threats to our natural environment and improving our resilience, we can save lives and reduce the heavy costs of rebuilding homes and businesses after natural disasters. This work also brings us closer together as a community as we work together to protect our shared home. We thank Swechha for their work to create a cleaner natural environment and for hosting these workshops on air pollution, river restoration, conserving biodiversity, waste management, vermicomposting, and growing your own food. I look forward to today's masterclass on how to run a green enterprise. Thank you again.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in for this masterclass. We are delighted to have Kush Sethi with us on board today. This is the sixth and final masterclass as part of a series of podcasts and masterclass that we've been doing called Green the Map with the US Embassy and US Department of State. So it's a pleasure to have Kush here. Thank you so much, Margaret, for that those wonderful opening remarks. And we're excited to learn more about Kush's journey here today. So without further ado, I'm going to leave it to you, Kush, to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about the work you do. And gradually we'll get into a lot of questions that I have in particular about the really, really interesting kind of work that you do. Very, very unconventional, very different from what most people who run enterprises or do this kind of work do. So Kush, over to you to introduce yourself and let our viewers know a little bit about your work.
Thank you for that, Ashim. So yeah, my name is Kush and I've been working in Delhi. I grew up in Delhi most of my life, and now I work in ecology and gardening in that sort of space. But growing up, I had no clue that, I'd be working with nature. In fact, I was kind of, nature trips, the family trips that we took were always my least favorite, as I can also recall from my old photographs. It sort of all started for me in 2010 onwards, I think. Around the time, I think this was the time when global warming was being talked about a lot. Al Gore's film had come out, and we were the younger generation then who were, like now, if I would look at Greta, I'm not saying I'm not comparing myself, but like being young at that time and seeing these leaders and these kind of having access to these resources was making me, question everything and feeling like, why are we not talking about this in school? And, why aren't my uncles and aunties and family not really caring about, like, I can see climate change, all the scientists are talking about it, but why do none of the adults seem to be caring about it? Yeah. So that's kind of sort of what triggered me. And I would say that is when sort of that switch flipped, and I knew I had to work in this sector.
Yeah. And so my introduction to you came, I think, back in 2016 when I had just been about 6 months into working with Svecha, and we were called to work with you all at the Delhi Walk Festival, and we do these interesting eco walks. So one of them was a Yamuna walk, and the other was this development walk across Khidki Extension. That's when I first found out about Delhi Walk Festival and Delhi I Love You. So it'd be great if you could actually tell us more about this the walk festival. I know a lot of viewers have been part of these walks that have been going on, except for the last few years. And also, if you could probably talk to us about how the last couple of years with the pandemic, have some of these walks been happening online, or what has been the course of change in the last few months with regards to the situation in the country. So I'd love to, yeah, of course, if you could start by telling us a little bit more about Delhi I Love You and Delhi Walk Festival, and then moving forward towards this as well.
Okay, that's a good question. That was actually one of the major learning curves in my uh, early career. Delhi Walk Festival ended up. It was one of the projects that the larger project, which is called Delhi I Love You, undertook. And this is the time when I was in my earlier sort of set of jobs that I was doing in Delhi, and a lot of things were happening in parallel. I was doing my first job was on the forests in Delhi with Toxics Link, where we were mapping Sanjeevan and trying to sort of understand what was happening in that forest, and a lot of that was also happening over walks. Uh, and side by side, I was taking on roles of digital outreach and doing social media. Me being the young person at that point, that all my other colleagues sort of ended up handing over that task to me. And Delhi I Love You was a project that started between three people in Delhi. I can name names. The Thoma, Alexis, and Astha. Astha being the friend I knew, and they were all from different backgrounds, from filmmaking, from journalism, and from working in the space of public arts. And what the idea was to sort of do projects about Delhi to celebrate the city, and to also identify people. There's lots of practitioners in Delhi, people who write, people who are musicians, people who are historians, and ecologists, and a lot of them have either been working and developing their own projects, or have these ideas in their mind that they want to sort of put together. And the idea of Delhi I Love You was also to partner with these people, and in different sort of ideas of exploring the city and celebrating the city, come up with uh, projects, individual small projects to work with these people. And in that effort, Delhi Walk Festival, because like I was saying, my first job was walking in the forest, and this was with Astha. Astha had I sort of overtook a role that she had left from that organization, and walking as an activity of exploring was really coming up. Even in theory, in universities, it was being talked about. And Delhi has so many walking spaces. It has a ton of historic sites. It has neighborhoods that have been explored, and small companies that started to be set up who were taking people on tours of the city, on food tours, on culture tours, and just even very personal storytelling of certain neighborhoods. And the idea of the Delhi Walk Festival was to identify these people. And a lot of these walks aren't really like somebody's full-time job, like as
Yeah.
it is for a guide outside a monument. It is sort of different practitioners doing different things in the city, but having a very keen sense of observation for something, or something that they have been writing about or reading about for a long period of time. And we were able to identify a lot of people, and Svecha being one of them, for working in Khidki for a long period of time, and working on the Yamuna and taking people to the Yamuna. So that narrative, it was interesting to ask and collaborate with people to just show other people of Delhi, because a lot of people even migrate to Delhi to work, young people, and there are older people who haven't really, seen these sides uh, beyond their either their memories of when they were younger and they would venture out more, or perhaps if there are specific tourist programs that they might have participated in.
And
So
I think you
this is
also get a different lens from the facilitator's point of view. As in, a lot of people may have actually gone to see River Yamuna or gone on a walk in Khidki or seen the community, but when you go with someone who's based there and is doing certain kind of work around that, it gives a completely different point of view altogether. So that's really amazing and fascinating to see. I've been on some of the walks, some of the old Delhi walks separately as well. Also had the pleasure of playing some music at Chunamal Haveli a few years back, so that was great. So yeah, and the second part of my question, which I guess you could also answer when we talk about your work with HaraMe as well. So for those of you who are listening in, Kush runs. I don't know if I should call it an enterprise as yet, but I think that's something that you're looking at building towards and building a team, which is something you can talk about maybe a little bit more and expand on that. But Kush runs a lot of interesting projects under the banner of HaraMe, and they do a lot of interesting work around. Actually, I'm going to leave it up to you to actually describe the different verticals. But I do know you sell different plants, different kinds of planters. You design homes for different people. You do interior designing. You do the balconies and terrace gardens, and at the same time, you also, I know, are doing a lot of interesting walks that you spoke about, which was a starting point for you. Some of the foraging walks. So if you could elaborate more on all these different things and how exactly does HaraMe work? What does it stand for? Most importantly, how did the name come about? Is something that we all would like to know a little bit more about.
uh, it's a lot of questions clubbed together.
Yeah,
I may wander off in one direction, so please just bring me back.
no problem.
I'll try and order them in a sequence. So HaraMe was sort of supposed to actually just be, we were one day, just me and some cousins were just brainstorming. I wanted to start a blog. This was right after I had finished my master's and I was back in Delhi, and looking at just very immediate thoughts, and learnings from I did a master's in green chemistry and sustainable industrial technologies, which again, like you were talking about walks, it sort of gave me a new lens of looking at sustainability from a very life cycle approach of materials and how things are designed and planned. And that's something that I was looking at everything, when once I was back in Delhi, and I had too many thoughts and I wanted to put them down, and it was supposed to be a blog, which I started, but I never really published a lot of things. But the name sort of, stayed with me. And after working on the Sanjeevan mapping project and working with Kush and working with Delhi I Love You, I had been side by side trying to build, some kind of these independent things that I was interested in. A lot of them being walks, and a lot of understanding of walking actually came from the walk festival itself, just organizing the festival, and understanding of, how do you build and design a walk. And side by side, there were these from walking in the forest, and that same question comes back again, that you were saying that, the point of going with other people is that if somebody is an expert of something, even if it's, very innate learning and or just, knowledge that they just have of a neighborhood, you get that lens and you get that understanding of seeing something in a different way, which is what I had no clue of. When I started walking in the forest, I was a green chemistry student who, wasn't really, had no sense of botany or forest management or GIS, for example. But I was just walking there with the perspective of, what seems right from a layman's idea of, if this should be in the forest or not, and then documenting everything and who were the users of the forest, just having conversations with them. And then what was exciting was my boss at that point, Ravi Agarwal, who's an artist and a activist. He he's the founder of Toxic Link. He used to push me to go on walks with people. So at that point, I was introduced to Manoj Mishra, to Pradeep Krishan, and other experts of the city. And just going on walks with them, I realized there were these narratives of ecologists versus narratives of the government and the policymakers. And it was they were very colliding. And I did obviously start to, accept a lot of the things that I agreed with, and I was also trying to sort of repeat them over in my practice, in walks, in my conversations. But there was this always this sort of, like, I knew that I haven't personally done this physically with my own hands. The Pradeep Krishan has been designing and making forests and parks and has written books about trees, but I am only repeating what these ecologists are saying. So I felt this urge to learn how to grow a plant, to start with. That, I can comment on what other people are doing wrong or right more honestly if I can also do it. And so that's how it started. And that sort of pushed me to start to do and take up gardening work and gardening projects. And it was all kinds of things. Somebody was interested in growing food, and a lot of this work in the beginning was sort of for friends and family for free, just in order to learn. And so food and basic ornamental gardens, or somebody wanted to build a green vertical wall, and yeah, so on and so forth. And to come to the word HaraMe, because I was feeling that, okay, I am now starting to do gardening projects. I am also getting very fascinated and curious about narratives of different ecological sites in the city, or even just urban spaces which have, I mean, all urban spaces have something growing in them. And the narratives of what ecologists are saying, how a sort of wild space should be maintained, or what is this wild versus tamed debate that's always happening. You can take it and you can sort of talk about it in the context of a forest, but you can also take it outside of the forest and look at the landscapes in the city, which are the tamed landscapes. But how comfortable are we to let them? How wild are we? Can we allow them to be? Because then the conversations about if a wild Aravali species should only grow in Sanjavan, but should it also be pushed for in a park as an avenue tree, and so on and so forth. And a lot of that wilderness, as you start to push, you push for biodiversity. You also tend to sort of push for less chemicals, low input in the sense of less resources, less watering, less labor. A lot of it also saves, in theory, I feel, saves a lot of money for the city as well in management of all of this. So I was very interested in this, and I started to develop walks for the sake of just answering questions that were going on in my head, and different walk ideas came out of it. And as you were saying, these ended up becoming pillars, a pillar of designing small gardens for people, but with ideas that I wanted to push forward, of biodiversity and upcycling, and just having interesting design, which was sort of new and not confined by the general horticultural ideas, or what a Mali says that this is how you should do. So I was like, why? And some species being weeds versus some species being conventionally and nice and pretty. So just and sorry, I again wandered off. So the word HaraMe is something that I'd already thought of a long time back as a blog title. And to come to the meaning of it, HaraMe is basically illegitimate in Hindi, if you translate it to a bastard, which was, I mean, then we came up with the name because we were looking for alternatives to organic and green. So Hara is what we were playing with, and HaraMe came up. And then why the literal translation of HaraMe works for me is because I was also pushing for this idea of who is selecting these species that should be grown as houseplants, or should be grown as garden plants. There's a lot of wild plants that are supporting and playing a lot more role in the local ecology than perhaps the plants that we are familiar with and are buying from nurseries. So these were the weeds of the garden. These are the bastard plants which nobody kind of knew where they came from. They just pop up. A seed would be in the soil from somewhere, and so I thought HaraMe. You know, I wasn't just pushing for a pun, and it made sense to me as a title.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. As I had no idea that I thought it was just a pun, as most people may have thought. But to go back into the story is really interesting to hear. Um, but what I wanted to ask also, just linking in this idea of how your main one of the focuses was to bring Delhi's biodiversity back in some way, whether it's to do with the shrubs or the trees or many different things that you've learned over years of being in these forests and through a lot of resource material that other ecologists have brought with them. So has this, because when we work, and often there is that clash, when we're designing balconies, or if we are conducting a plantation in a park, or if we're doing anything to do with urban greens, so to speak, there is always that clash in terms of what we are planting. So has this been a challenge for you in terms of when you're working with clients, when you're working with people, or I mean, I wouldn't say when you're conducting workshops, because those are usually people who are coming to you to attend a workshop and learn more. But if you approach a client, has it been a challenge to sort of explain to them why it's important to do this and why there are certain species that you're choosing, or that's not something that's ever hindered your work as such?
Uh, I think like the challenge would come a lot more if this was a public project that you would pitch for, perhaps. And it's a shared space, so then there's lots of expectations from many different kind of users. This it hasn't come out so strongly in most projects, except a few again where there were many stakeholders. Like let's say if it was it was I did one project in East Delhi where it was a new building that had come up for a family, and it was everything, like all the balconies, terrace, some plants around the building as well, and being many different stakeholders, and everyone had certain. There's people who will say, do what you want, we don't know, you're the expert, so we'll just you whatever you bring. And it's the idea is, I learned this from Pradeep only. He says that a lot of plants that are being grown conventionally is because people think that they're pretty and they're beautiful, and that's why people grow it. And there's this associations with them, of scent and memory or stories. And if we have to push for natives, or natives in his case, we have to find a way to make them sexy. Isn't always going to be natives, because natives aren't so accessible. So I'm pushing for the general idea of sustainability, that maybe I'm pushing for plants that are going to take less water, or perhaps low maintenance, or less replacement of productivity, in the sense of maybe they'll offer food, or they'll attract a lot of bees and butterflies, but also trying to also restrict myself to not completely go rogue, in the sense of not start growing lantana just because it's pretty and easy to grow and easily available.
Yeah.
And for clients who don't really know about any species, they'd be totally happy with it. So I try to restrict myself from going in that direction. But in terms of restrictivity, not so much. And people who are approaching me, I think that sort of gets established in the first set of meetings as well, that I won't just grow anything that they want me to grow. And if they're looking for that, I think my hesitations come out in the initial meetings, and I don't end up getting those projects where people want lawn maintained,
Yeah.
and large groves of palms, and uh, there's many such examples, and artificial walls of now you get these square feet panels of
Exactly. Yeah.
fake plants that you can buy. It's 500 rupees a panel or something, and upwards, they can be really expensive fake plants, and people just want that ease of maintenance and perception of green, and are happy to fill up uh, a 5-story internal wall of a house with fake plants.
You
And
have that entire layer of artificial grass on terraces and whatnot, which is awesome.
yeah, and I have learned to not be extremely rigid as well, so as to not lose projects completely,
Exactly.
but also push slightly, like try and find a negotiation in that and not encourage those things at all. But if somebody is very very persistent, then come up with a solution so as to not make it feel like an eyesore. I certainly don't think artificial plants look beautiful at all. They're very stagnant there, in the sense that they will never change. They're only going to catch dust, which you have to keep washing. Whereas a real plant, even if it's a perennial plant, is going to change throughout the year.
Yeah.
It's going to have insects and birds landing on it, which you won't see on a fake grass stuff or a fake wall.
Yeah.
So far it's not been that difficult. I would say that if it's something that I'm very uncomfortable with an idea or a concept, then I'll probably not end up getting that project.
So, and in terms of a business module that works, is it divided on the basis of seasons, or is it something that just comes on a client basis? How exactly does it work? So, like for example, the walks is something that's up to you, that you design at a particular point in time in the year, or is it all year round? Of course, right now with restrictions, it's been difficult to do that, which is something you could probably elaborate a little bit more on in my next question. But what I wanted to get a sense of, rather also what people listening in would want to hear from you about, is in terms of how does the entire business model really run? As in, is it structured, or is it based on just clients? Is it just ideally doing different things and building and using your network and conducting things as per like, do you work according to a calendar? Is more of what I'm asking, if you're able to understand what I'm trying to ask, or what I'm trying to get at.
Um, it's a mix of things, and it's also evolving as I've started working. Initially, it was primarily based on what kind of work I had at that moment, and my goal was just to keep working and keep learning. Uh, but at the moment, it's become more structured in the sense that, yes, I agree that the calendar part works, because primarily right now, if I were to look at the pillars, I'm doing three kinds of things. One is I'm making physical spaces, physical gardens. The other is walks and workshops. And the third thing I would say is teaching, that I try and pick up teaching work, uh, at least two sort of visiting faculty roles once a year. It also keeps me on my toes to continue to learn and continue to share. The teaching work usually happens August onwards or July onwards. Monsoon semesters, I've noticed, and are the ones where colleges and universities usually have co-curricular modules, because ecology is still. I'm also not an ecologist. If I'm not an expert who could go teach ecology for a majors course, but I can at least make it exciting enough for somebody, for any other stream of students. And this is something that I used to feel very strongly about during my masters, that ecology is something that should be kind of engraved into all courses, businesses, even law and arts, perhaps. It should somehow. There's so many subjects like that right now that need to be taught, even if it's as a small chapter. It should be in a lot of different streams as well, which is the kind of work I'm getting in teaching. Um, and walks tend to not happen so much in the summer. It's I'd be happy to do them. I walk throughout the year, but it'll be hard to sell tickets in the summer.
Yeah.
And we've learned that in the walk festival as well. I mean, just selling 20 tickets becomes a challenge if
Yeah.
the weather is not right, and which can be for all kinds of cases, even for monsoon, for that matter. But so I think August onwards it becomes easier to do walks, and the pandemic did really take a toll on walking, because it's a group activity, and you need to be together, and you have to be close by. It's not something that I can carry a microphone and talk to everybody in a natural space. So because parks were shut, nurseries were shut, neighborhoods were shut, So in a way that all the spaces that I like to explore were kind of not accessible. Walking did get halted, and I'm mixing two questions here.
Yeah,
I'll come back to the other one. Uh, I noticed that like when the pandemic hit and when we were all locked down, I couldn't, gather any excitement to do things digitally. I know a lot of people jumped to that opportunity and started to do all kinds of workshops, Insta Live every day. Everybody, all small businesses were online, talking about their work, doing Q&As, and it's just, for me, it's just seemed like I can't, physically go and touch a plant or see what's happening to it. And a, a lot of what I do in the walks is just spotting things at the right time and then talking about them. It's not a chapter, or it's not just, a theory that I can sit and talk any time of the year. Obviously I can, but it's not how I learned things, because everything was very touch and feel. Uh, I zone out if it starts to feel very theoretical. So I have to be around the plant, and so I initially I couldn't do anything digitally, not even attend other people's talks for that matter. But slowly, I think by the second wave, I came around to it. Uh, Mostly because I started to then adapt to being at home and make new observations. So sound started to become very strong at that time. There was a lot of silence. There was very few traffic sounds. And if you were not in the summer, you wouldn't even get like, evenings would be dead quiet. And you could hear people in their homes. You could hear not cicadas, but I'd say crickets. Cicadas if you're near a forest. Bird sounds started to become a lot more prominent, and just general, I felt that a lot more birds and insects were coming onto the garden on my terrace. So because I had no option, I started to make a lot more observations in my own small space. I started to record, make close up videos. I had two lenses which let me zoom into things and also look at just mobile lenses. If the one is a tele lens, one is a macro lens. So I started to kind of observe and stalk insects and make very detailed videos and take recordings. Started to put them together as content for Instagram, and this ended up getting me two gigs. One was a workshop with Science Gallery Bangalore, where they were doing a digital sort of exhibition.
okay.
They do one per year each year, and this year because of the pandemic, they were doing it digitally. And I realized because I'm doing this, it I started to give it a title as Wilderness at Home. That you are stuck. You may have access to a few books, but you can still order books online after some point. And what is it that you can still explore? Instead of just looking at your screens, which I was hating. So this ended up becoming one walk. It was a workshop, for example, not so much of a walk, where I tied up with one of my cousins who lives downstairs and has worked a lot with beekeeping. So we started to observe beehives around the house. Some, in fact, just by looking at from a tele lens on the trees from
Hmm.
our balconies. So, which was very easy. You're standing in your balcony, or just for half an hour, you're staring at a beehive. You get a lot of insight into where they're moving, where they might be getting their flora from. And if I'd see the same bee on the terrace, you get close-ups of pollen stuck on their hind legs, and so interesting kind of documentation was happening side by side. The second walk that came out of the pandemic was in the second wave. This was a collaboration with my former colleague Astha and another friend who's a filmmaker, Anant Raina, where we made an audio walk of Lodi Gardens.
Hmm.
And it was just a very descriptive walk of a mixed set of things, not like from a gardener's perspective, but not necessarily about plants you can grow or something like that, but just all kinds of things about what are the interesting spaces of Lodi Garden from my perspective, from my lens, and not necessarily and there was very little history of any of the monuments. But what are these secret spaces that I've seen, and which time of the year do I see interesting things there? Stories of Mali, stories of their seed collections, and then some just general fun gossip of babus and
Yeah.
their hierarchies and maintenance and things that go about in the management of a large scale garden like that. And this was all kind of recordings with sort of layered with recordings and soundscapes of the garden. We tried to also include as the real sounds of uh, of the descriptions of. I mean, slightly try to be literal in that as well. So this was supposed to. It was an experiment. It was supposed to kind of be a two-way consumable audio, as to you can just sit at home and listen to this audio, or and just close your eyes and try to imagine that you're there. Or the other was you can take the audio into the garden and try and follow the same route that I have taken. If you've done it, if you're doing it at the same time, you might also, you actually don't need to do it at the same time because you're listening to a different soundscape as
And
to what
it's
might be
still
happening.
accessible online as well for people to.
Yeah, this was with IIHS, which is
Okay.
Indian Institute of
Yeah,
Human Settlements. It's on their YouTube channel.
nice. I'd
And
seen this on your Instagram as well when you had posted it initially. Sometime last year itself, you had done this, right? I think
uh,
of last year or something.
yeah, last year towards the end.
Towards the end, yeah. So one last question, I guess, which is something that I wanted to discuss with you to get a better sense from your side, is of course you've spoken about the challenges and of course the difficulty of switching to a digital medium, specifically when your work is so on the ground and when you like being on the ground. One of the things that I'd like to hear from you, given how the world has, of course, changed in the last 2 years drastically, and a lot of people have, shifted completely to virtual. Is virtual, of course, doing walks is one thing, but in terms of expansion, is it a big part of what you want to do? And also, uh, it, if you could elaborate a little bit, I know I spoke about this in the beginning about how HaraMe is not. I mean, you told me in fact that it's not as yet a green enterprise, so to speak, but it's something that you'd like to expand on. So, what exactly are you looking at in terms of the future of HaraMe, in terms of what are different kinds of projects that you want to do? And are you looking at getting more people on board? Because I'm sure a lot of people who are listening in would be really fascinated by this work. A lot of people who are coming out of college, working in the design sector, wanting to get into the environment space, would want to know how they could get involved with you, or how they could learn more about the work you do and connect with you in some way. So maybe if you could elaborate a little bit more on what are some of the future plans, to put it in short for you, what are some of the future plans that you have for yourself and for HaraMe going forward?
So, I mean, as of now, I've completely been doing this solo. In terms of, I wear all the hats. I'm doing the creative work. I'm doing the project management. I'm doing the logistics of side of it as well. Uh, and yeah, I know because I'm not a trained ecologist per se. I'm constantly learning, and I'm sure ecologists also need to learn throughout their career in a lot of sense. So here I'm switching, like, I'm trying to balance my time in all of these roles. Uh, I'm also going to answer a little bit of the previous question. So now, right now, I'm focusing a lot more on garden designs, which has become the major part of my business at the moment. Walks tend to be mostly as a way to, disseminate information and also build an audience who and actually end up sometimes end up hiring me to design a garden for them. But that's not the motive there. It's also the motive is to sort of just disseminate information and build a network of people. Uh, and so the challenges right now I was facing are all of these hats that I have to wear, and I need to figure out ways to share those responsibilities with people, because it can get quite quite a lot often. And just I felt being at home, and in the last 2 years it starts to get hectic, and everyone's health has been getting affected from that as well. uh, So I haven't yet worked with any young people in the sense of collaboration. Whoever I've collaborated with has been mostly only for walks, and that too sort of, it's complete, like it's a collaboration. It's not that I've asked somebody just for help, or I've asked somebody to work on that project with me. So I've tied up with artists, I've tied up with uh, comics experts, with people who do collages, with charcoal illustrators, and a couple of those things. But I think I'd like to collaborate with different people on the gardening front, because there's a lot of skills there that I don't necessarily have, and it takes me a while as for each project, as and when I need to learn that thing. And it's not always easy to straight away go to vendors for the same things, because if you have to first be slightly aware of fundamentals of certain things, especially when it comes to build stuff. So I need to find ways to work with young architects, or young designers, or people who can sort of, not necessarily, they don't have to be from ecology backgrounds, but have a sense of some vision for green spaces, or sensibilities of ecology and sustainability and design. And if my for in terms of virtual projects, I don't know if I want to do too much. I would like to continue to produce, like I was saying, in terms of the hats I wear, I also started to wear this hat of uh, digital content producer, but not as much as a YouTuber, or like, as a content maker, but just documenting different aspects of the work that I'm doing for myself as well. And it's very interesting to see different stages and cycles of plants which you physically planted. So uh, I think I'm swaying away from your answer a bit. But yeah, so just doing more digital work. And I think I've wandered off. Could you remind me the question, the last bit?
Yeah, no. So I was my thing. There were two parts. One, of course, is how people could probably connect with you and get involved with you if that's something that you're open to. And the other thing was, uh, given how things have changed, is digital something that you're looking at incorporating into your work going forward on a more permanent basis? Like, are you looking at some permanent verticals that be completely digital? I know, workshops is something that you strayed away from initially, but going forward, is that something that you'd want to do more, or what, more of these walks that you were talking about, whether it's the Lodi Gardens collaboration or other things? So yeah, that.
Okay. Sorry, I at some point I got confused about why I was talking about virtual space.
Yeah,
Uh,
many questions coming in one go. But
uh, so I mean, I am currently also doing another virtual session with students at Ashoka, which is an evening co-curriculars class. Again, the motive was to get them to, the title of the course is called Unraveling Urban Ecology and Landscape Design. And the point was to sort of, you know, while sitting at home, how can somebody help you, take that lens and go outside and explore it yourself? Because I can't be with them. Uh, but I've been finding it very challenging and very restrictive, and I've been dying to meet that, even if I can get 3 classes physically, I'll be able to take them out even just on the campus and do a lot more. But I'm adapting to it. I don't want to completely be, have a closed mind to digital. So as and when things come, and as and when it feels right, I will keep trying to, but I don't think it's going to be my main focus. Now that things are open, I am very strongly, and I, all the focus has gone into building spaces and building gardens and growing things. And I'm trying to keep some time out for myself to, keep reading and keep going back to those spaces. I mean, just natural spaces on my own to keep learning. And I think in terms of future of projects, I would like to work a lot more on land, So far, a lot of my work has been around buildings. So either inside buildings or just at the peripheries. So it's mostly container gardening with a few examples of some spaces, some neighborhoods that have actually still have lawns left, haven't reconstructed and converted the lawn into the still parking, for example. So I'm looking forward to getting uh, some land-based work, and also to sort of collaborate with people who have a know-how of building things on land. So tie up with architects, for example, and so I don't have to go so much into building work. And I would like to have. I mean, I would be totally open to uh, people wanting to learn about this, and if somebody has time, and I can take on more people in the team for sure.
Perfect. Yeah, I think there'll be a lot of people who are tuning in and who have heard about what you do, would want to write to you and learn more. And I'm sure you already have a network of a lot of people who attended workshops or been part of different events or different things that you do. So with that, I think we are out of time, so to speak. I mean, a lot of things that I would like to ask you, but given the limited amount of time that we have, there is one question that when we put this out that we're doing a masterclass with you, one of the things that did pop up a lot is, and it's something that I also had. So if you have about 2 minutes, maybe we could answer that last question, which is, you spoke about these gardens that you do, terrace gardens in specific, when you're doing them. One of the things we wanted to learn in terms of, when you, throughout the calendar year, I know that you do a lot of maintenance visits, because you do post a lot about the different gardens that you set up, not only for promotional work purposes, but also to for those are the maintenance visits that you're really doing, and you're showing that this is from step A to step B to step C. This is how the garden has actually developed over different cycles and over different periods of time. So can you elaborate a little bit more on how that maintenance process works? As in, what is your role after setting up the garden? Are you involved in, so for example, if saplings need to be replaced, or if the design needs to be changed altogether, are you responsible for carrying that entire process out, or is that something that the client has to do themselves? Where does your guidance stop, so to speak, in this entire?
That is a very interesting question. I don't have an exact answer. It's been evolving over the years. I am now, in fact, looking more towards maintenance of gardens to some extent. One, I mean, it initially started because I felt that, the space that I built, the moment you build it, it doesn't really look nice. It's just a set of pots with some plants in them. It looks very bare. It looks very right out of the oven kind of a look, which I know it's a wrong example. Right out of the oven should look nice and steaming. Uh, it just looks very raw, and it has no action in it yet. It's just young plants, and things haven't gone wild and rogue, and how I would have envisioned the plant to be in its full potential or its full growth. It will take a while for it to reach there. So initially, the post photographs and the stages that I was sharing were not really maintenance visits. It would just be clients reaching out and sending photographs, or tagging me in their stories as just an appreciation or joy that they're feeling, that Kush, we're so happy that after 1 year this is what it's looking like. And then sometimes when things are genuinely thick and lush and wild, it would be a really a moral booster for me as well. So I'd go and photograph things and then do and share online, before and after, before being right after completion of the project and after being 1 year of people looking after things. Sometimes this can go completely wrong if we have tried to envision a project in a certain way, we've selected the species in a certain way and the materials and grown things as per a vision, which I'm always trying to make a garden jungly. That is always my goal, even if I'm trying to be sly about it with the client. uh, but sometimes when right after finishing a project, they'll hire a mali, and the Mali will start to come and prune and remove all the mulch, because they feel that the soil needs to be clean, and dig the soil every day, even though the soil that I've made is really soft and porous, that it's a no-till soil. So in some projects, when I go back and I'm like, oh, what has this project turned out to be? I'm not going to share about this. So those examples happen as well. Maintenance now that I'm interested in is because of this same reason, that uh, I've noticed that it's not like a building that I construct and it's, the building is going to be the most beautiful right after I finished it. And it's only going to age after that, which can be interesting in some ways, but it's also going to age in the sense that it will deteriorate over time. Whereas a garden is the opposite. It's going to only become better over time. So I feel there are some things that, I don't feel completely convinced right after completion, and for that reason that I've started to feel that I need to figure out ways to at least offer maintenance, of basic maintenance, of just visits for at least a year or two, if the clients are willing, because then uh, we can do all sorts of things that you mentioned. If some things are not doing well, we can quickly replace them, but also then continue to stick with the vision and not replace them with anything that you figured out. And these things are also coming, these questions were also anyway coming to me from clients that, oh, this thing hasn't worked out, or this thing has started to go yellow. And these questions were anyway coming. So I thought it makes sense to build this as part of the project.
Thank you so much for taking time out to answer that last question as well. Something that many people had. It was something that I wanted to bring up earlier, but I think we were in the middle. We were diverging a lot from different themes and going into a larger conversation around some questions. So sort of got misplaced in the middle. That's why it came back right at the end. But thank you for taking the time out, and thank you so much for being here today. I know this has been long overdue, and ever since I was able to rope you in for this, I was very, very excited and looking forward to actually learn more from you in terms of your work. Because, of course, I've been following you for so many years now, and we've met a few times and exchanged notes or been a part of different things that we do. But just to spend 1 hour with you here today and learn in full detail about what you do and what HaraMe stands for and what future plans you do have. Uh, I don't know what to call it essentially. What do you, so I, do I say organization or do I call it a venture, or what do you refer to HaraMe as when you tell people about
That venture or enterprise is totally fine. At the moment, personally, when I'm writing about it, I call it a practice, independent practice,
it?
like a
Okay.
doctor's.
Yeah. So your independent practice or your venture or your enterprise, which I hope only grows stronger and stronger as things progress, and hopefully in a couple of months' time, we should be able to also meet in person, and I'd love to attend some of your walks as and when you do. Do you have anything lined up in the next few months or next few weeks or anything?
I mean, there are things in the pipeline.
Hmm.
Not, I haven't given them dates yet. It's too. I mean, there'll be a mix of digital and physical walks.
Yeah.
It's basically the older people who I've collaborated with. I was again collaborating with them for Ashoka's uh, classes, and
Hmm.
we thought it's interesting that we are now trying to convert our physical walk into a digital walk,
Yeah.
and how can we do it both ways parallel. So there may be two coming up soon, but I don't have a exact uh, date or format for them yet.
Perfect. So I mean, I guess one can follow your work all on Instagram and Facebook and know what's happening when. As in, that's one of the main platforms to sort of get to know. Or I do.
Yeah, I post everything that I'm about to do on these two platforms, and when I'm more regular with the walks, I start to also put out a Google form so I can continue to have access to some people's emails. Those are the main two formats, and otherwise, if even if I'm not doing anything, I keep saving people's data when they reach out to me or if they're interested. And sometimes if a set of friends can sort of gather together and so show genuine interest, and if I have time, I end up building things for them as well.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you once again for doing this and for taking the time out to be here with us and share your work and your experience. And we look forward to meeting you in person and doing a lot more things together, hopefully in the new year as well. So thank you, Kush. And if there are any more questions in the comments or on any of the platforms on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, I'd be sure to forward them to you so that maybe whenever you get the time, you could answer some of those for our viewers and could respond back to them. So thank you once again, and look forward to seeing you very, very soon.
Thank you, Ashim. This is a good conversation.
Yeah. All right. Bye bye.
All right. Bye-bye.